And the meeting is now open for the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Okay, Craig.
I have lots of gratitude for this church and how it has really helped my son. He's 17 and goes to high school. It's always been a challenge getting him to get up in the morning. The lesson, citation 11, Science and Health, page 67, verses 4 through 7, Mary Baker Eddy says, "The entire education of children should be such as to form habits of obedience to the moral and spiritual law, in which the child can meet and master the belief in so-called physical laws, a belief which breeds disease." And that happens in the Sunday school and in interactions with the members here. He recently, well, not kind of recently, from last year, started playing the bells of Bruce. And ever since then, he has gotten taken on a greater sense of responsibility in his life. And he more regularly attends Sunday school. Last year, he missed the morning school bus almost every day, and I'd have to drive him there. But this year, he hasn't missed it once, except one day he had to stay home. It does happen that children's thoughts prepare to be able to do the things that they need to do, and I realize they want to do. I always told him, God gives you the strength to do what you need to do, but until he started playing the bells of Bruce and attending Sunday school more regularly, it didn't matter. It was a fight that he didn't win. I thank God for our church that lives Mary Baker Eddy's Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures.
Thank you. Betty from California, go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you for the music and for the readings tonight. Today I was reminded of a healing I had some years ago while I was still teaching. I experienced some back pain. I think sciatica is the word that comes to mind. At this time I was getting ready to start a new school year, and there was lots to do. I called a practitioner from the Plainfield Church for help. She gave me some things to work with, but also told me to unclench my thought, like letting go of a rubber ball one had been squeezing tightly and letting it go back to its normal shape. I asked for help 2 or 3 more days on this, all the while working on unclenching my thought. The healing came while listening to the Plainfield Church Wednesday testimony meeting with my mom. Right in the middle of the meeting, all the pain just left, and I could feel everything relaxing. I went to work the next day totally free and clear of any trace of pain. I am so very grateful for this healing and proof of God's care, for practitioner help, the Plainfield Church, and for pure Christian Science that is taught here. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
I am grateful tonight for all I have learned here in Plainfield about Christian Science, about right thinking, and about watching. I've given testimonies about how I used to feel helpless when watching the news, and how coming here and learning to watch has healed that. Tonight, I would like to specifically thank my practitioner for teaching me the importance of not skirting the issue while watching, but of actively going after the error and seeing it undone. She has also many times said to me that the watches need to have the clout that the correct statements of truth bring, which this church has in abundance from the Bible, the writings of Mary Baker Eddy, and those of the early workers. Because of all this, I feel I understand a little more each day of what it means to have dominion and what it means to live without fear. Additionally, if claims of fear or helplessness try to enter in, I now have 5 years of training in this science and a bookshelf full of tools to help me combat those claims. And of course, practitioner support, which has been absolutely essential to the whole process from the day I arrived right through today. Very grateful to God for every blessing that has come as a result of being a member here. Thank you. Oh, and now I have a testimony from Diana in Berlin and Vienna.
Hello, this is Diana from Vienna and Berlin. I'm in Berlin now, and I want to express my gratitude again for everything, but this week I want to express my gratitude for the testimony meetings, particularly for the testimonies of Florence and Gary on September 26th. Gary testified to the many ways that God protected and cared for the church during the years of the legal battle with the Mother Church. He also talked about how the Plainfield Church Independent is an organization led by God, and that all of you who are part of it really trust God to lead the organization. I've been thinking a lot about how we all need to be a spiritual organization in our lives, our businesses, our careers, our endeavors, in everything we do. I'm envisioning a spiritual life for myself and everyone on the earth, and envisioning all of us trusting fully in God and God's direction. I am envisioning myself and all people on earth choosing to live in the Christ consciousness, in the secret place of the Most High, so that we can all be aligned with God's voice and feel God's protection at all times. This is helping me to see myself and all others following the first commandment and overcoming the mesmerism that there is a power other than God. And this is giving me a lot of peace. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Bruce. I'd like to say thanks to Dede for those marvelous readings tonight. And it is so true that there is absolutely nothing that's impossible to God. And I also want to give another shout out for the music that we had that Jim played for us. Included in the prelude was, "The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" Very inspiring. Thank you. Well, my testimony tonight is, thank God for Christian Science here in the Plainfield Church. Many years ago, I remember being taught in a class here that says, well, if a problem ever arose, that's because the answer is right at hand with God. And I think this is like another plug for this article, Demonstrating Christian Science by Gilbert Carpenter, where he goes on to describe how Mrs. Eddy assigned tasks to people in her household and gave them what appeared to be a relatively short period of time to do it, which meant they had to demonstrate the answer or how to do it. So anyway, with that instruction, of course, like everybody else, I've been faced with problems and tasks that looked like impossible. But we didn't accept that here. So I found myself saying to myself as a result of this teaching that there is an answer. And I can feel that as soon as I made that statement, the mesmerism that appeared like there's no way was melting away. And I found myself more in listening mode and not in complaining mode. And there, in that way, the answer could come. And the other thing that helped me through the years was I had to be taught that it was important for me to be thankful. So when I had challenging tasks in front of me, I found myself saying, "Thank you, God, that there is an answer and that you have it right at hand." And that even without even knowing what the answer is, but that approach opened the door for the answer to appear in God's way. And many times it was maybe something else needed to be done, or maybe it had to be done in a way that's entirely unexpected, or some way God was working out his plan in his own way And my job was to simply listen for the direction and allow him to work through me, whatever it is that he had in mind to do. So I'm thankful for the teaching and the power of knowing that there is an answer every time, because God does give it, but he gives his answer. And that's always the best one. Barbara or Ken from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Hello. I've been thinking today about Jesus' words, loose him and let him go, part of the Lazarus story. Today, I'm interpreting it as stop thinking of him or her as material or as a mortal personality. Relinquish your sense of him or her as having limited character traits or perhaps struggling with some claim of inharmony, illness, circumstance, or sin. Loose him or her and let the true view shine through. I'm grateful for that inspiration. We had a simple experience today, tying somewhat into the theme of tonight's reading. We were going to an office we've been to many times, but most often miss the undistinguished parking lot entrance, requiring a time-consuming indirect way back. As we were drawing closer, I simply acknowledged to myself that it was possible for us to see and turn into the right spot. Then it occurred to me exactly how to tell Ken where to turn in, which worked perfectly. Thank you, God, for the little stuff, too. Thanks for this service, the music, readings, and testimonies, and thank you, Plainfield practitioners.
Thank you. Rick from Ottawa.
Yes, thank you for the readings. I'd like to give thanks to the Plainfield Church and all its tireless workers that put together such invaluable content and make available such content, their tireless sacrifices of time and effort to do good. The healing I wish to relate to you happened 4 or 5 years ago. Although I was raised by going to the Christian Science Sunday School, I fell away from it quite early. And apart from the healing of a little bird, which could have been coincidental, I really can't remember having a single incident or healing that might indicate to my young mind that God heals. So eventually, I fell away from it, as did the rest of my siblings. Although it did have an influence on my moral framework, and I remember fondly some of the church members, and more specifically the loving expressions of one practitioner in particular, and the kind faces and mannerisms of many others. Somewhere in my teens, the fire was kindled, and I started to get interested in Mrs. Eddy's writings in other Christian Science literature, the Journal, Sentinel, and other books that my grandmother had around the house. I remember applying its teachings to the treatment of a wart to have it disappear within a day or so, and was quite wild with this, even though I can't say I really understood what happened. After a tragic accident and a series of bad life choices, I more or less made a shipwreck of my faith and went through a long period of struggle and mental issues and anguish, and was more and more gravitating towards the logic and reason of atheist assertions and questions, slowly being mentally whitewashed into believing my experiences were probably just psychosomatic in nature and that I never really will understand it anyhow. Flash forward through a life that didn't really seem to work very well anymore and filled with a lot of mental issues and struggles. I arrived at a point in time a few years ago where I suddenly experienced extremely violent, disturbing stomach symptoms. Having mostly wrecked my faith, I can't say what prompted me to seek out a practitioner. Maybe deep down I really did feel it was the truth and that I had enough proof that I couldn't ignore my intuition. Also, having witnessed another family member's outcome from similar conditions, I didn't want to go the medical route. So I drummed up the courage to call a Christian Science practitioner. The nice lady talked to me, defiantly talking down my fears and talking up my real being. After giving me some reading to do and doing a little more talking for the next day or so, on the phone, I arrived to a point where I was thinking I'll have no choice but to seek medical attention as no improvement was evident. That night, I went to sleep. During the waking hours, my consciousness was illumined with a loving light and presence. It's hard to explain, but at some point I became conscious that something external to me was moving and filling my mind. The sense of well-being and love was so awesome. And for some reason, there was swirling green lights in my mind. I can't say for what time period this went on, but at some point I felt the presence and light pulling away and fading into the fog. And remember my mind sort of screaming out, no, no, don't go. All I can say is that as much as I love my family, I would have left this world right then and there to stay with that feeling I was experiencing. I woke to an extreme sense of well-being, and the bulk of my symptoms were gone. I went to church the next day and sat down next to the practitioner, and the first thing she said to me, with a slight smirk on her face, was, I prayed for you this morning, or yesterday morning. And I replied with an enthusiastic, yes, I know. For the next month, my body and my mind were like that of a 16-year-old. I don't know how much I would pay to have this heaven on earth kind of experience once in a while, but it'd be a fair ransom. I am by no means an exemplary moral character and have many flaws. So I give this testimony in hopes that others don't think that their situation is hopeless. Also that God is. Discover that starting point for yourself. No matter what logic or human reason seems to argue otherwise, you can discover for yourself that God is the help in time of trouble. From this launching point, I've been going forward, and I'm truly thankful for the most singular, amazing experience of my life and for those that made it possible throughout history. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Day from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Growing up, it was always hard and extremely rare for me to believe or to be convinced that something good was impossible to do. I was never competitive, though I enjoyed challenges which would allow me to prove the possibility of a positive outcome, no matter what the odds. With this, it was always natural for me to encourage others to face and defeat their obstacles in order to prove the power of good for themselves, and to do so repeatedly. I'm so grateful to have come to know God through my study of Christian Science in this church. I have learned and to be constantly reminded that it is God, good, the only power, who makes all good things possible, is giving me the courage to stand up to every challenge and to encourage others in need to do the same, with the understanding that I cannot do anything good, and neither can anyone else without God. And since God is in each of us and is in control of every situation, no good thing is impossible. I'm so grateful to have this understanding in this point in my life, and to know that I will have it forever to demonstrate and to share with others is a true blessing and a great comfort. I'm thankful for our practitioners who share this truth consistently to heal so many each day. Thank you so much for tonight's meeting and for all of the testimonies so far. I'm very grateful for all that's going on in this church, to be a small part of it, and for all that everyone's doing to bless the entire world. Thank you so much again. Good night.
Thank you. Dale from Virginia, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for all the inspiration shared in this church. and for all the tools we have to work with to find our own inspiration. Recently, my husband and I were to make a short trip, which had been long planned. 2 days before leaving very early one morning, we both started becoming very sick with colds. I remembered a testimony given by a member of this church regarding a similar situation. Upon calling a practitioner here for help, the member was told, "Maybe this is preparing you for your trip." The member said he humbled himself, was quickly healed, and the trip was a blessing to all. When speaking with the practitioner here in this church, the day before my husband and I were to leave on our trip, I expressed gratitude for that member's testimony, and we discussed how when traveling, we need to do more prayerful work and not less. As it turned out, because of the length of our travel times, I had lots of time for reading and prayerful study. The trip was successful, very enjoyable, and we easily accomplished all that we had planned. It wasn't until days later that I realized that neither one of us ever suffered with the colds. They were just gone. I'm just so grateful for all that I'm learning to put into practice in this church. And thank you so much for the wonderful readings tonight, for all the testimonies and the very beautiful music.
Thank you. Chardell.
Good evening. I wish to offer my gratitude tonight for my practitioner who is faithfully helping me. Through prayer and support, I am learning to open my heart and mind to stay focused on God, study the works, Mrs. Eddy and her true followers, and pay attention to all the teaching here at Plainfield, including our watches. As has been mentioned several times, the website offerings are numerous as well as outstanding. One thing that stood out to me recently is the article called Saving the World by Bicknell Young. I would like to share just a little bit of it. Quote, "Our government is a part of our consciousness, and in redeeming our consciousness, we shall save our government. Our government was established by divine principle, and it had its beginning in a thought of human freedom many centuries before it appeared in human thought. When we come to a great test in this country, it is not who is in Washington, but what is right." End quote. This means a great deal to me, especially now when our country seems so divided. As my practitioner has said recently, quote, "Fear no hate and let us love more," end quote. Thank you for the readings and our beautiful music.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you very much for the service tonight. I'm very grateful for what I have been learning here from my practitioner that has opened my eyes and heart to the power and presence of God, replacing fear and doubt. One day, while we were traveling on the road, a friend of mine and I, there had been an accident which was causing a very sudden backup. We had been praying before, as we have been taught here, for example, to know that God is behind every wheel. Every lane had cars in it. Even in the shoulder, it was backed up. Tractor trailer was in there. I think the accident was on the left. And all these emergency vehicles were starting to come. And it looked almost impossible for them to get anywhere. I mean, it just wasn't a spot for anyone to move. And I did have a temporary passing thought like, oh no, this could be an hour or two. And then I stopped that immediately, knew that was negative and not productive. And then we had been holding that God was in control, that there was one mind, one activity, and harmony was the law. We then suddenly witnessed the most incredible natural parting of cars. I'm not even sure how they got where they did and when, and it was almost like a dance, the way they kind of moved either to the left or gently to the right, and it just opened up like a path for these emergency vehicles to move in. They never had to stop or wait or slow down, and nobody was rude or impatient, and there were no close calls. It was just so gentle and smooth. I just was awed by it. It was like a hand came in and just moved everybody aside, and the traffic never stopped. It never backed up. There was no blockage, and it shortly dispersed. It wasn't a long wait at all, and actually nobody was injured or hurt in the accident that had taken place. It was, to me, there was no human that could have orchestrated that event. And so I was very grateful for that experience, and I'm very grateful to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Florence, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the beautiful message in the readings tonight. Tonight I have two testimonies, one from Florida. He says, I want to say again how grateful I am for finding Plainfield's website for Christian Science, Mary Baker Eddy, and wonderful workers like you. In essence, for finding God again. The wonderful healings taking place in my life are demonstrating proof of God's all power and His love for me and all. During the last couple of weeks, I have experienced joy that I have never felt before. Then this week, difficult circumstances at work tried to drag me back down. Reading a hymn my practitioner from this church suggested, in the atmosphere of love divine, we live and move and breathe, and following her reminder to see my co-workers only as the children of God has brought about changes in the office atmosphere. On Monday, a co-worker came into my office venting about another member of our staff. She was quite angry and upset. I could hardly believe it when, after emailing my practitioner and holding on to the truth she offered, the situation very quickly turned around. It didn't take more than 15 to 20 minutes. I went outside for a break, and as soon as I opened the door to come back in, this co-worker stated that they made up. She even went so far as to organize the birthday plans for the other staff member. I couldn't help but smile and thank God for His goodness. He truly is all love. I am grateful for the work going on in this church and for my practitioner's work in helping me to lift others and myself above the mist. And tonight, I would like to give gratitude for the practice of Christian Science and how it changed an old habit. I remember how I would always quickly say how difficult some work would be, how I couldn't meet certain obligations because of some human outlining, or how I would say the day was going to be difficult because of how much I had to do. Well, I learned that the Bible message from Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, that trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not on thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy path. This I came to understand meant that if I needed direction, I was to turn to God first. What I was doing was staying with the circumstances first and sounding my own alarm bells. That was a wrong order of things and a wrong habit. Even though this sounds simple enough, I had to learn to quickly go to God first, no matter what the circumstances were. and from there gain the right direction from which to act. It took quite a while, but that change from alarm first to God first has brought so many wonderful changes in all areas of my life, and I'm most grateful. It has proved many times how nothing is impossible to God. So grateful for God and the comfort of His truth from the Bible, how Christ Jesus proved these truths, and for how Mrs. Eddy has given and explained her revelation so that we can all follow and be free. Thank you so much for all the testimonies proving God's care. Very happy to be here tonight.
Thank you. Mary, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I have a few things to read tonight, a couple from the church website bulletin board. The first, Pennsylvania. Thanks so much for today's Bible study, so many helpful ideas. And the next, from Wisconsin. Thank you, lesson writers, for giving us weekly lessons that instruct us on what we must do to demonstrate Christian Science. Every week I highlight the points and then easily reread them to reveal what needs to be corrected in my thought. And then an email from Virginia. Thank you over and over for an outstanding roundtable discussion entitled, Fear Not, I Will Help Thee. I keep learning more and more every day. Thank you for stressing what is important for us to know and keep on hammering away. It certainly is having a positive effect on me, as I am sure it is having to so many others. Thank you so much for the beautiful music tonight, testimonies, and the beautiful readings. Nothing is impossible to God. One thing that we were taught here was in the chapter glossary. We were given several statements to memorize, several definitions. One being what was read tonight, the definition of God. It was something that I worked with then and I still work with now. We were taught to apply it to ourselves and also in watches to our nation and to our world. Mrs. Eddy says the definition of God, I'll just read the first part of it, but God, the great I am, the all-knowing. All-knowing. If God is all-knowing, therefore I, as His reflection, am all-knowing. I know all that I need to know when I need to know it. All-seeing. As God is all-seeing, I too am all-seeing. I can see what is necessary for me to see. Mrs. Eddy defines eyes as spiritual perception. I have that spiritual perception to hear God's voice and to judge righteous judgment, all-seeing. And then all-acting. All action being in mind. All movement is in mind. Therefore, it is free, it is painless, and it is without restriction. All wise. The only wisdom is from above, and as I am God's reflection, I can express that wisdom. I will know the wise and righteous thing to do in every circumstance that comes into my experience. All loving. I am the image of love. As God is love, therefore I can express His love and feel His love and be a loving presence to all that I come into contact with. This is just some of the ways we were taught here to use this definition, to make it our own, to make it a reality so that we can live it and be it. And then what was ended in these readings tonight from miscellaneous writings. Man is God's image and likeness. Whatever is possible to God is possible to man as God's reflection. I'm so very grateful for this truth. I'm so grateful to Mrs. Eddy for giving us Science and Health and Prose Works to work with daily to make it a living reality in our lives. I'm certainly grateful to be here with you all tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.